Hi, welcome to Sitecore Bootcamp. My name is Eric Sanner,
My name is Brandon Bruno.
and we're going to be giving you a brief introduction to Sitecore. Sitecore is a content management system that supports content personalization, A/B testing, supports analytics, user tracking, marketing, and user goals. Sitecore is broken up into pages, as you would imagine. Like any other site, has header, has areas for content regions, and footers. Sitecore is built with placeholders. They're named regions where you can put content. And as you can see here in one of these CSHTML files, this is the main layout file that has the header, the body tag, and defines multiple placeholders. These placeholders can be nested within each other. So if we look at this header top placeholder, it's going to reference this header top CSHTML, which has two other placeholders. Inside the Sitecore admin, which we'll get to in just a moment, we can see that placeholders can also restrict which content can be displayed. So in our site header, we can only display a top bar. And in a navigation component, we can display a logo, menu, and another navigation bar, which you can see here, logo, navigation, and navigation. That's really helpful to content editors. It protects them from putting the wrong types of content in locations where it shouldn't be able to be displayed. Renderings go in placeholders, and the renderings are what draw content modules on the screen. These are linked to MVC actions and controllers in ASP.NET, but Sitecore MVC is slightly different than what you might expect for regular ASP.NET MVC, though they are similar. If we look here at this navigation controller, it looks very much like MVC. We have our controller and our action, which is going to call our link menu action. And then this opens our link menu CSHTML file. And so this is how this navigation gets drawn here on the screen. Data sources let us reuse content throughout the site. So the social menus that we have displayed here at the top of the page, these icons, they're content managed here in this list in the tree. But when we go to the home page and we want to actually use those, we define them in the data source. So here's our left top header, and we can see that it's pointing to the global links social menu that we just saw a moment ago. So now let's move on and actually show you how to interact with the backend pieces of Sitecore that you've seen just a little bit of here. Let me switch back to this guy. So when we want to log into Sitecore, we're going to go to our website /Sitecore, which will bring us into the login page. The default username and password is admin, and the password is lowercase letter b as in boy. We'll be able to change that later and add new users, but that is the default that ships with Sitecore. So when we log in, this brings us to the dashboard page. Lots of different tools here that you can see. We have our marketing items here on the left. This lets us set up our analytics, our campaigns for goal tracking, and lets us see the user paths through the website. So some really interesting features here. This middle section gives us our different editors, our content editor that you just saw a moment ago, the experience editor, which we'll show in just a moment, the media library where we can upload images, graphics, documents, things like that. The control panel lets us get to background settings for Sitecore configuration items. The desktop, which we'll use here in just a moment, gives us access to all of these features as well in a way where we can see them in a tabbed interface. So it's easier to get to multiple things at the same time. On the right here we have our user management and security settings for roles and user access. So let's go ahead and jump to the desktop now. It's a good habit when you are getting started with Sitecore to go to this desktop. From this Sitecore Start menu down here, you can access all of the same features that you can get to from the dashboard, and some that you can't. And these development tools don't have an icon on the dashboard, so this is the only way you can get to these tools. And it's a good habit to get into opening this view here. The other thing that we can do from the desktop is look at the different databases that make up Sitecore, and we'll come back to that in just a moment. For now, I want to go look at the Experience Editor, and it will show how you can edit pages in Sitecore using the Experience Editor. So it loads up a new ribbon at the top of the page, and as you move your mouse around, you'll see that different areas of the page highlight with boxes and become editable as you click inside of them. So not all modules are set up to use the Experience Editor. In this Habitat site, everything can use the Experience Editor, but you may find that not everything supports it in different projects that you work on. So when you see something that you want to edit in the Experience Editor, you click it, it becomes a box that you can edit, and you can type into the box. Once you're done making your changes, you'll want to make sure you come up here to the corner and click Save to save your changes. And then you'll want to publish that. And publishing makes the change visible on the web. And we'll talk a little bit more about publishing in just a moment. The other way that we can edit content is using the content editor, which we just saw a moment ago. Looking at the content tree. The content tree has expandable items that let you drill down into different parts of the website. And the path to the pages in our website are determined by where they're at in the content tree. So we can see here, starting from this home node, we have About, Habitat, and Introduction, which takes us to this page here. And notice that my edit that I made in Experience Editor mode shows up here as well. So we have first this content node, that's where all of our content lives. We have the layout node, which is where we define in Sitecore our layouts, the main wrappers for our sites, which we can see here is this default wrapper. We also have in this layout area, we have our placeholders that we mentioned previously. Our site header, navigation. We also have our renderings. These are the modules that can be displayed on the page. From here, we also have our media library where we can upload our pictures. Habitat images. And we can see that this background image is indeed here in the media library here. And the last piece that we want to see is this templates area. This is where we'll store all of the templates for the project and the site. You can see all of these here. And then again, if we come back up here to the content area and we make changes here, you'll be able to see that when I save these changes and we publish them by publishing just this item for now, that will make that item visible on the website. Okay, so a little more background on Sitecore. Everything in Sitecore is considered an item. Some items have presentation that you can see by going to the URL, like this About Habitat introduction page. Some items are content items that can't directly be displayed by going to a URL. So global, links, social menu. You can't just go to this URL and see this icon. Everything that's outside of the content node are non-content items, and they can't be displayed by going to a URL in the browser. All of our templates, our placeholder settings, renderings, and templates. So let's talk about databases. There are 3 databases that make up Sitecore. We have the master database, which we've been looking at currently. This saves all of our content as we're working on it. It also saves our versions and our version history. Anything that you do in the master database has to be published to move to the web database. The web database is what's visible to visitors of the website. In order to move something from master to web, we have to do a publish. And we saw that just a moment ago by when we published this item. There's a couple of ways that we can move item from master to web. We can do that by publishing a single item. We can also publish the site. There's a smart publish, which will only publish the changes between the master database and the web database. And we have a republish, which will republish the entire database. If you have a large website, the republish option can take a bit of time depending on how many items there are. So you want to be careful when you use that one. The third database is the core database, and this is where Sitecore stores all of its items that it uses internally. So you can see if we look at the content tree while we're in the core database that it has a very different set of items. So you won't come here very often unless you really get into the details and inner workings of Sitecore and you really need to change some functional pieces of Sitecore.
This is where you're going to see a lot of interface settings and button configuration, stuff like that. I'll say that in my experience working with Sitecore, this is where I definitely spend some time customizing some interfaces for content authors, for example, which we'll get to later.
Okay, so we just talked about publishing. I want to show you about versioning as well. Versioning in Sitecore is not automatic. Whenever you make a change, it saves on top of the current version. If you need to make a new version, you have to click the version button here at the top right and then add a version. This will make your new version. Now any new edits will happen on this version, saving your previous version. You can also have different versions for each language, and they can be separate. They don't have to be versions in the same numbering style. But it is important to remember that if you do want the version, you have to click this button. It won't do it for you automatically. Sitecore can support multiple languages. You can set up as many as you like, and you can publish them at different intervals, and you can create the content differently in each language. Last interesting piece about Sitecore is the workflow capability. It's generally not used by default. It needs to be set up and created, but it will let you manage content with a draft and approval process, so you can have different reviewers approve content before it gets published. So a couple of things to think about as you get started with Sitecore. Sitecore is like a big box of building blocks. You can build whatever you can imagine, but it doesn't come with a lot of things pre-built for you. We're looking here at the Habitat site. This site was fully built out as a demo of Sitecore's capabilities, but anything that you see on the screen needs to be built by hand. So it makes sense to maintain a library of components that you use across different sites, or use a framework. There's several frameworks that exist. Proficient has its own called Ignition, and as platforms grow, there's more and more components that are pre-built readily available. We've been looking at Sitecore here with MVC. You can also build using web forms, but do keep in mind that Sitecore MVC is not the same as ASP.NET MVC. They're very similar, like I mentioned before. In Sitecore, Sitecore becomes the controller that manage calling your controllers. And what that means is that not all of the concepts in ASP.NET MVC work exactly like you expect them to. One of the big ones that I tend to notice is with the redirect. This brings us to the end of our overview of Sitecore. This is a super high-level overview, really quick, just to show you how to move around within Sitecore at a really high level. Refer back to the Sitecore Bootcamp module to learn more about installing Sitecore on your local machine, setting up your local development environment, and building your first module. Thanks for watching.